Life kind of went on, and I rose higher and higher in the cadet org.
But now you still hadn't signed a Sea Org contract.
Oh no, I did, because I finally decided, okay, I'm staying here in Florida. I'm going to join the Sea Org, and I joined a Sea Org contract. I signed a Sea Org contract, and I joined the cadet org.
Did you kind of give up?
Yeah, I gave up.
Did they do some sort of a handling on you?
Yeah. The showing me the bad pictures and the good pictures. Well, okay, in the canteen where we bought stuff, they had pictures from the WOG world, or, the world outside Scientology.
WOGs are everybody who's not a Scientologist.
Yeah. And then they had pictures from inside Scientology. 2 different boards. Okay, one would show, like, Sea Org members in their uniforms, and everything's great. And, those pictures they have in magazines, people are like, things like that, and they're like, oh, they're so happy. And then on the other picture, on the other board, they would have like Marilyn Manson. They would have like fires. They would have like, at one point, I think they even had like dead bodies in the morgue, just like so that we when we thought of the world outside Scientology, we thought of like horrible things, dead bodies, drugs, and when we thought of the Sea Org, we thought, oh, people are happy, spiritual freedom. It was like. Yeah, it was just labels.
Round about this time, when she was visiting me, and she was asking me, I think, about psychiatry and how bad it was and how bad society was, because obviously she'd been exposed to these pictures. So I said, well, in actual fact, Zoe, surprisingly, recently, the last few years, the economy has actually been very good. And America is more prosperous than it's ever been. People are doing better. There's more money. People are happier, and in actual fact, crime statistics are falling right now. Murder rate in LA is the lowest it's ever been. And they say it's connected with the good economy. I just kind of told her really what was going on, and then she went back and repeated this to her mother, and apparently her mother like blew up. Like, who's telling you the economy's good? He told you that the economy's good. He told you that crime's dropping. What?
This is what you're telling me. This is outrageous.
Yeah, when I went to my mom, and it was like he told me this all on the same visit, like the same like 2-month long visit. So then when I went back and I wanted to go, my mom was saying, oh, it's really bad out there, and how will you survive? It's like a jungle, and it's horrible. And then I said, Mom, the economy's doing good now, and all this, and psychiatry really isn't that bad, and all this. And she turned white. She was like, and then she did blow up, like Dad said, because I remember I kind of got scared. I was like, whoa.
But I mean, it's so outrageous to hear you saying this, that.
Oh yeah.
I mean, this indoctrination is so heavy-handed. There's nothing subtle about it. I mean, it's just outright indoctrination.
Well, like that policy. The Earth is going to be no longer inhabitable by the year 2000. Then nothing mattered except making sure that we could survive on this planet,
What you're saying is true, but, I mean, I remember reading those policies, and, we never had these bulletin boards like you're describing, or anything like that. This is children that they're indoctrinating this with such a heavy hand. I was an adult when I got in, so I was always a little bit skeptical about the world's about to end stuff, and I mean, I had already been in the real world for 23 years before I got into Scientology, so I never really lost my connection with it to the degree that you're describing. As a child growing up in this,
I just had that connection.
I just had no idea the degree of indoctrination the children are being subjected to. I had no idea. It's horrifying.
Yeah. It was just like the way I was raised, I mean, I didn't really, I guess I didn't really believe the world was going to end that soon. But if anyone asked me, I'd be like, well, elevation. Oh no, I was told that it might be extended because Scientology had been here for a while now.
And yet, these few things that your dad told you kept you from being completely indoctrinated into this.
Well, I was pretty much completely indoctrinated. I would say,
So, now you moved up into high posts in the cadet org.
Yeah, and then they said, we're going to make this cadet TTC, so a cadet technical training corps, which
And
means we would train, like, yeah, we'd be training or studying Scientology.
To become auditors.
To become, no, not to become auditors in this case, it was to become supervisors and word clearers, so the adults no longer had to supervise the kids. The children could supervise themselves in their school. And I studied among adults I did this for a year.
This was at Flag?
I studied 11 hours a day for 6 days a week, except for Saturday because I had that morning time, but the rest of that. And then the other day, Sunday, when I didn't study Scientology, I did 10 hours of school to keep in my school time. I went on something called the Student Hat.
The Student Hat.
How to study. It's a course on how to study. And you could only take the day off every 2 weeks that you're supposed to get per policy if you were on target on course. And I was never on target on course because I was always, late in the Student Hat. So finally, my days just got unbearable. It was so horrible.
Because you weren't getting any time off at all.
Well, I could have stood that. I'd stood that for a long time, but it was doing something that was just so boring. Because I would like read one page, like in a day, I'd get through half a page because I'd read that page, and I would say, you know what, you're supposed to feel great about everything you study. You're supposed to be all happy about it, and I wouldn't be. So then they would say, you must have a word in there that you don't understand because that's Scientology study technology. And I would say, no, I don't. I've looked up every single word, that whole page. I would look up in a dictionary and practice saying in sentences. Like looking up the word and all 30 definitions or like that. I was
And
really
the, and A, and of.
Yeah, and I had a label on me. I was called significant.
Yeah. That's a very bad thing to be called in Scientology.
Yeah, it is.
It's what they call all the students that are really trying to understand what he's saying.
Yeah, I was really trying to understand because I was like, I suddenly decided I'm going to be in the Sea Org now and I'm a cadet. Then I should,
really
get
understand
meaning
it.
from this. So then people started mentioning the EPF for me, which was a training corps to go into the Sea Org. So I said no at first because I remembered everything Dad had said and I was still kind of wary. And after a while, when it just got so bad and I was crying every day on the Student Hat.
Anything to get off course. Huh?
Anything to get off course. And I thought, I considered all that really hard work you're known for doing on the EPF, I considered that, when I thought of that, it seemed like so much fun.
Compared to what you were doing.
Compared to what I was doing. So I went on the EPF, and little did I know, they would just have me word clear the Student Hat, clear up any words I didn't know on the Student Hat over and over and over again in my study time. So I was just doing this illegal work because I worked all day from early in the morning till 11 at night, except for 5 hours of study I did. And the 5 hours of study was just going over the Student Hat. And
you were 12?
No, I think I was, because I was a year on the cadet TTC, so I was around 13, 14. I don't remember exactly.
So when you say you were doing illegal work, what do you mean?
I mean, not illegal work, but illegal work hours. But I was staying up late at night and sleeping during the day to do carpeting jobs. I was handling machinery that I shouldn't have been handling.
Isn't that against regulations?
No.
Actual...
I don't know of it being. It's normal.
But I think you were too young by the law to be...
Yeah, I was.
Didn't you tell me that you were operating one of those hammers for
jack-
smashing a jackhammer?
I did that later in the QI.
Okay.
A big jackhammer. But...
what kind of machinery were you dealing with?
We would transport stuff, or we would have to use this thing that would carry gravel up to the top of the FH roof, of the sandcastle rooftop, like a conveyor belt sort of weird thing that would go up kind of slanted so it could get height. We would be using...
You were operating that?
Yeah, not I didn't, but I ran people that did. And we would be using carpet knives and sharp knives that we should have been using. I think it was more in the cadet org that I used the circular saws. I did use a drill gun and some saws on the EPF, but not as much as in the cadet org, later in the cadet org, because I was on the Renos team later in the cadet org. I went through a lot of hard stuff. I had to run large groups of people, about 30 or 40 people in work, and like I mentioned, carpeting we did this week-long job where we did carpeting at night and slept and studied during the day. Like, but we didn't have enough sleep anyway because we had to fit studying in too during the daytime. And this old Russian man, probably about 55 or 60, his name was Sasha. Carpet knives go like this, and then they bend up like that. And we only had one guy that we'd hired from a carpet company to help us lay it, and the rest we were just supposed to do the work of it, the EPF was. And I was assigned in charge of everyone. And he had a carpet knife, and he put it in his pocket so that little part kind of stuck out though. And he went like this, and he picked up the carpet, and he cut his wrists like this, not the inside of it, but the outside, like from that. And I only knew a few words of Russian, so I came rushing over to handle this because I was the IC. And I was like, oh gosh, are you in pain? But he didn't understand a word I said. So I wrapped my hands tightly around, I should have probably wrapped it around here because that's where the blood was coming from. But I wrapped it around his wrist because that's all I could think to do, stop the blood. It was really bleeding badly. So we walked from the second floor of the CB where we were carpeting.
What's the CB?
Oh, the Clearwater Bank building.
The Clearwater, okay.
That's where all the staff eat here in Clearwater.
Okay.
And so we walked down to the truck, and by that time there was blood we were leaving a trail of blood because he was bleeding badly. We got in the back of the truck, and in fact it was the carpet guy that we'd hired that was driving us. He was the one really worried about it.
The non-Scientologist, in other words.
Yeah, he was non-Scientologist, a WOG. So we drove to the hospital, and I'm holding it, and I'm so scared. I don't know what we're doing.
Where'd you go, Morton Plant? The one right down the street?
I think so. I don't know. And so I went in there, and I was holding it, and they couldn't even tell which one of us was bleeding because there was blood all over me. I had it on my face. I had it all down my uniform. It was on my shoes, and like our hands were just like a bloody mess. Like we were just holding each. It looked like we were holding each other. And so we brought him into the room, and we laid him down, and we couldn't get any information from him, or like, you know, was he allergic to anything because he only spoke Russian. And then it was about 4 or 5 in the morning, so then the emergency staff turned to me.
This was 4 in the morning that this happened?
Yeah, because we were working all night. And then they turned to me and they said, how old are you? And I think, by that time I was 14, I said 14. And they were like, what were you doing with them? They're like, why were you there? They were totally questioning me, and I said, you know what, I just happened to be there. I was just kind of, I'm friends with one of them, so I was just sort of standing by and helping out. In fact, I was running the whole team, but I was like, oh, and they didn't really believe me though. So, and then finally someone said, you know what, he's Church of Scientology, and then they were like, oh, there was like a murmur sort of thing through the room. They were like, oh.
Was Sasha okay after that?
Yeah, he got stitched up. And everything.
Did you get in trouble for going to the hospital or anything?
But when the Sea Org training officer, which was a Sea Org member in charge of all of us, but he hadn't been there during our work time. He was like, yeah, he got himself cut, because it was like stupid of the guy to get himself cut. But the Sea Org training officer, by the way, would do like pretty bad things. Like, we had a lot of people that came from Russia because suddenly a group of them were recruited and put on the EPF.
This was when Scientology did their whole
campaign
in Russia.
Yeah.
So they brought a whole lot of them over here to join the Sea Org?
Yeah, like at one point, almost the whole EPF, which was about 60 people, was full of Russians.
Uh-huh. Whatever happened to all those Russians?
They became like handymen and maids, did all the lowly labor.
Were they still there?
Sasha's now, he polishes the brass banisters inside the lobby of the FH.
Must be pretty shiny.
Yeah. I mean, he does a few other jobs, but that's mostly what I see him doing. So, well, Mr. Engelhardt would do things like...
Now, who's Mr. Engelhardt again?
Oh, he's the Sea Org training officer. He was the Sea Org member who was in charge of all us EPFers, David Engelhardt. Well, the Russians all came over, and they weren't used to Florida weather. It was in the middle of summer, so some of them didn't really understand deodorant that much either because they come from cold cities. So this guy named Vladimir, I guess his feet stank. I never smelled them, but Mr. Engelhardt came to muster one day. He told him a few times he should get it handled, put some powder in his shoes. And he was in a bad mood, so he came over to the line that Vladimir was in. He's like, whose feet are that? and then he pushed the whole line of people, so they kind of like went back. They didn't fall, but they like kind of were shoved back. And then he got Vladimir, picked up his foot, really like, Vladimir was babbling in Russian. He had no idea what he'd done exactly. He was like, oh. And Mr. Engelhardt, like, picked up his foot. So Vladimir fell on his back, like, just suddenly, and then Mr. Engelhardt picked up his shoe, like, jerked it off his foot, and threw it right next to Vladimir. So Vladimir, like, ducked because he thought it was going to hit his head. And Mr. Engelhardt's like, go soak your feet in bleach, anything, just get rid of that smell. Your fucking dorm stinks. And just yelling at him. And Mr. Engelhardt was known to have a bad temper. Another thing, we had a storm. We had this storm, and down by the sandcastle, which is another building of the Sea Orgs, they get scared of flooding sometimes in bad storms. So we had to go down and put sandbags out there. And Mr. Engelhardt was giving this whole lecture on how dangerous it was and how we had to be careful. And this little like 13-year-old guy, he kind of snickered a little. He's like, because it wasn't that big of a deal. And Mr. Engelhardt took him, and we were like standing on this concrete like walkway that was like, there was a drop like about 6 feet down for trucks to back up and unload stuff, or I don't remember exactly. And Mr. Engelhardt took this like little 13-year-old boy and hung him over the edge. Like the guy's feet were still on the edge, but they were kind of slipping off, like because he was slanted. He hung him over the edge by his shirt, and the guy was like, he was all scared, and Mr. Engelhardt's like, this is not a joke. Do you think I'm joking? This is not funny. And he's like, don't laugh again. And he put little boy back, and the guy tried to like, he tried to like laugh it off. He was like, oh, but he was all shaken up. Mr. Engelhardt actually got really mad at me at one point for, I'd borrowed a public Scientologist book, and I'd forgotten to return it, and now that person had moved off, and they sent me a letter asking for it back, and I didn't know where it was, so I was like, oh no, this person sent me a letter, I don't know where it is. And he got really angry at me when I couldn't find it. And he had me in his office that day, and he yelled at me for a long time about how I was a horrible person and how I wasn't ethical and I wasn't responsible and I didn't deserve to be a Sea Org member. And I started crying and crying, and he put me in lower conditions again, which were like doubt and, you know, where you have to make amends and do all these projects and, you know, grovel at their feet. And
always. Yeah.
And oh, well, there was one thing Mr. Engelhardt did that was kind of nice. I don't think he did out of niceness, though. There was this lady, she'd gone to a weekend seminar on Scientology, and she joined the Sea Org right away. And just through talking with her, I found out about, she had really bad skin cancer, and no one knew that she'd only been in Scientology for a weekend. She had like, she would go out and she would start forming tumors, like, she'd had like almost 50 or something like removals of tumors. And you could see it in her skin. She showed me all these scars, and I hadn't really recognized them at first because she was very pale. She didn't get tans at all. And so I found out about this, and she told me, and I said, whoa, and I told Mr. Engelhardt. And Mr. Engelhardt just kind of told her, he said, you know what? He said, if you were just like to leave quietly, I wouldn't say anything. And so she left, yeah. And this was a good thing because it saved her from the Sea Org. But I think he was just doing that because, like my dad mentioned about my cut knee, the org doesn't like to pay for medical bills.
It costs way too much to deal with it.
Yeah. Oh, on the EPF, at one point I slept in like a broom closet sort of thing, like our cleaning closet.
Why?
Because I'd come back from a visit with my dad, and they didn't have room for me. The rooms would be really crowded. And, oh, the rooms were so crowded. We would have, like, between 12 and 18 people in one apartment with a bathroom for all of us, and we'd have to take, like, 1-minute showers, like, really quickly. And
this was EPF?
Mm-hmm. We did also in the cadetic at one point, too. But it was, you know, we had a bit more time there.
Was this all girls in the?
Yeah, it was all girls. So we would have to take showers really quickly, and the dorm captains were taught that they had to be very strict and would write knowledge reports, like little reports on out ethics, things we had done in the room, like stayed up late, ate food in the dorm, stuff like that. My friend Cece Fraser stayed in longer than a minute, and the dorm captain was yelling at her to get out. And Cece had left the door unlocked like she was supposed to.
Who's the dorm captain?
Anne something. She was Russian, so I don't know. So Anne rushed into the bathroom and like tore open the shower curtain and ordered Cece to get out. And Cece's same age as me, like 14 or something, and Anne's 25, 26th. And Cece's sitting there naked. And she's like, get out. And she was all, and Anne's like, no, you get out now. And so, anyway, stuff like that would happen.
Oh, God.